بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. You are welcome, dear students, in the College of Distance Education. We are going today to have the second lecture in Grammar 1 concerning the first semester of College of Arts and Languages and also College of Women and College of Distance Education. In this lecture, we are going to explain the present simple tense. We have previously explained the present continuous tense, and today, inshallah, we are going to explain the present simple tense and how do we make a sentence in the present simple tense, and how do we make negative sentences, and also how do we make questions in the present simple tense. In this tense, you know that in English we have so many tenses, and the present simple is one of those tenses which are common in English, and it is used commonly in English language. The present simple tense is the tense that is used to express the actions that are always that happens usually and happens a lot, and to express sometimes facts. Something happens repeatedly. Look here, we have, for example, some examples here in these sentences. We have, for example, nurses look after patients in hospitals. I usually go away at weekends. The earth goes around the sun. The cafe opens at 7:30 in the morning. So all these sentences, they express things in general, and they express something that happens all the time or repeatedly, or that something is true in general. That means the present simple tense usually use it to express sometimes habits or sometimes facts. Sometimes if we have a fact, when we go, for example, that the earth goes around the sun, for example. So this is a sentence that expresses a fact. So we have to use the present simple tense. And we have also we have to use the present simple tense sometimes to express things that happens usually and repeatedly happens, like the sentences that I gave you now. For example, like when we say, for example, that we go to the college every day. So every day, this word expresses that the action is repeatedly happens, and I mean it frequently happens. We go to the college every day. For example, we have lunch at 1 o'clock every day in the morning or in the afternoon. So these sentences, they express something that happens usually every day. In this tense, we have to explain that how do we make. So we also use this tense, the present simple tense, to say how often we do things. For example, how often do you play football? How often do you go to the market? So we have, for example, now look, we have some sentences like, for example, I get up at 8 o'clock every morning. How often do you go to the dentist, for example? So these sentences, they express the present simple tense because they say that to ask how often something happens. For example, when I say I go with my friends to the park every Friday. So how often do you go to the park? I mean, I go to the park every Friday. So the answer of how often is always a present simple tense. And also when we use those, adverbs of frequency, like, for example, every, like always, like usually, like sometimes, these adverbs are usually used with the present simple tense because they are used to express how often does the action happen, and how often do you do something. For example, when I say I always, for example, help my father in the shop, I, for example, sometimes go shopping, I sometimes, for example, meet friends in the evening. So these sentences, all of them, they express that, I sometimes, for example, hear the word sometimes and the word usually and the word always, which are called adverbs of frequency. These are called adverbs of frequency, and they are mostly used with the present simple tense. In these sentences, all of them show that we have how often do these action happens. But also we have look at this one. Julie doesn't drink tea very often. For example, Julie doesn't drink tea very often. Also we have, for example, Robert usually goes away 2 or 3 times a year. So all these sentences express how often something happened. Also, we have in this lecture, also we are going to talk about some verbs that should be used in the present simple tense because they usually express the present simple. For example, you have these verbs which are, for example, promise, suggest, for example, have apologize, advise, and insist. These verbs usually used in the present simple tense. For example, when I say, for example, to someone, I'll come to your house today, I promise. I'll come to your house today. I promise. We cannot say, for example, I'm promising. We cannot say I promised. We cannot say, for example, I was promising. So we have to use the present simple tense where we say only I promised. For example, okay, don't pay the money, for example, in the shop. Okay, I'll pay that. I insist. Okay, so I insist to pay that money. So we have to say I insist. We don't. Okay, we are not going to use, for example, I'm insisting or I insisted. So we have to use the present simple tense. So look now at these examples in this. Okay, in this point. For example, when we say when you promise to do something, you can say I promise. When you suggest something, you can say I suggest. I promise I won't be late. I promise I won't be late. So we have to use here I promise. So this verb promise is usually used with the present simple tense, not promising. Also, we have, for example, what do you suggest I do? So I suggest that you do so and so. So here, suggest should be used also in the present simple tense. So when I ask someone, what do you suggest I do? He will say, I suggest that you, for example, you stay at home. I suggest that you go to the park. I suggest that you go swimming. So suggest here is used to in the present simple tense. Also, for example, in the same way, we can also say I apologize, I advise, I insist. So all these verbs are used in the present simple tense because using these verbs in the in another tense cannot be appropriate use. So now we have another point concerning the present simple tense, which is the word always, the adverb of frequency always. And we know that always is one of the adverbs of frequency that are used in the present simple tense, okay, with the other adverbs of frequency, like, for example, usually, like sometimes, like often, like every. These adverbs usually used to express frequency, and because they give how often does someone do something, so they are used in the present simple tense. For example, now we have difference between, sometimes we can use always in the present simple tense, and sometimes it is used in the present continuous tense. So now we'll see the difference between always in the present simple tense and always in the present continuous tense. So we can say, for example, I always do something, or sometimes I'm always doing something. So always here can be used with both tenses, with the present simple tense and with the present continuous tense. So when I say, for example, I always play football with my friends in the afternoon. For example, I always go shopping on Friday. I always do my homework, for example, in the evening. So these sentences, all of them are in the present simple tense. And when we see these sentences, we see that they are used, to express something that happens repeatedly and how often something happens. So always usually used with the present simple tense, and to express frequency and to express that something happens frequently. And also sometimes we can see that the word always, the adverb always also, which is the adverb of frequency, it can also be used in the present continuous tense. The present continuous tense, when we explained in the previous lecture, we know that the present continuous tense is usually used to express something or actions that happen at the same time, that are happening at the same time of speaking. So when I see, for example, some boys playing at this moment, so I say, look, they are playing, and look, they are reading something. So the present continuous tense, which is previously explained, is used to express actions that happens that are happening at the same time, which is different from the present simple tense, which is used to express something that happens repeatedly, not at the same, not something that happens at the same time. So now look, when I'll give you some examples of always, when I say I always play football with my friends in the afternoon, this sentence explains that, or expresses that we every day go playing football at this time in the afternoon, for example. And also when I say I go shopping, for example, I always go shopping on Friday. So these sentences, they express that the action happens repeatedly, that means every day and frequently, but not happening at the same time, like the present continuous tense. But now when we see that always sometimes can be used with the present continuous tense, so we'll see the difference now. What does it mean when always is used with the present continuous tense? Is it the same meaning of that of the present simple tense, or it is different from the use of the present simple tense. But okay, so now look, for example, when I say I'm always doing something, I'm always doing something, I'm always explaining something, I'm always complaining, okay, about something. So in this one, okay, that means I do something often or more often than normal. That's okay. So for example, when I say I do something, okay, but I mean that sometimes I may not be satisfied with that action that I do. When I say, for example, okay, you are, I'm talking about my son, for example. Okay, I say to him, you are always using your mobile, for example. You are always using your phone. So why are you always using your phone? Because this is something, okay, I mean that I'm not satisfied with this action. I'm not satisfied with, and this action is okay, doesn't happen normally, but happens sometimes. And I mean that, okay, so the action here is not satisfied by, for example, by the speaker. When I say, for example, okay, you are always complaining, you are always, for example, okay, phoning me, you are always calling me. So when I say you are always calling me, I mean that, okay, I'm not satisfied with that action. Okay, why do you always, okay, calling me, for example? Why are you always complaining concerning, for example, your, okay, your children? Someone's children, okay, are naughty. So he always comes to me and he says, okay, my children are very naughty, and I'm angry, okay, because of that action. So I say to him, okay, you are always complaining about your, okay, okay, children. So I mean that when I say I'm always complaining, so I mean that I'm not satisfied with that action, with the complaining of that person. Or when I say you are always, for example, using your mobile, so that means I'm not satisfied with using your mobile, okay, along. So I mean that. So now I'm always doing something. I mean something does someone does something more often than normal. I mean, okay. So I mean he always doing something, but okay. So he makes the listener sometimes is unsatisfied with that action because he always says something. He always repeats. For example, some actions, some complaints, some okay, something every day, so that we can use always in the present continuous tense. In this case, I mean when something okay often okay will have something happens more okay than normal, or like these sentences that I gave you now. For example, we have Paul is never satisfied. He's on in these sentences. Paul is never satisfied. He's always complaining. He's always complaining. I mean, he complains too much. When I say he's always complaining, I mean he complains too much. For example, you are always looking at your phone. I say, for example, to my son, or sitting with someone, I say, you are always looking at your phone. So don't you have anything to do else? Okay, don't you have anything else to do? So he should do something else because he is wasting time, because he does something that's not okay. So I say to him, you are always looking at your phone because he does that thing usually and more than normal. So, and I'm not satisfied with that action of that person. Now we'll move to another point in the present simple tense, which is the negative of the present simple tense. Negation and questions. How do we make sentences in the present simple tense negative, and how do we make questions also in the present simple tense? So first of all, we are going to talk about negative sentences and negation, and how do we make a sentence negative in the present simple tense. Sentences in the present simple tense, they can have, for example, auxiliary verbs. Like, for example, when I say Ahmed is a doctor, Ahmed and Ali are friends. So these sentences are also in the present simple tense, but we have are here and is our main verbs. So how do we make these sentences negative? So if we have a sentence with auxiliaries, which have auxiliaries as main verbs, we only make them negative by using only the word not after that auxiliary. For example, Ahmed is a doctor, so we can make it negative by saying Ahmed is not a doctor. So Ali and Saleh are friends. Ali and Saleh are not friends. So we only use not if we have auxiliary. For example, I have dinner sometimes, like this one, but have here it may have another another way of negative. So concerning these two sentences now, which I gave you concerning is and are, so these sentences are made negative by using not only after is and are, but they are also in the present simple tense. But those sentences with main verbs, like for example, play, like visit, like run, like eat, like drive, So these verbs are usually made negative by using don't or doesn't according to the subject that is used in the sentence. For example, now when we say Ahmed plays football, for example, in the afternoon, Ahmed plays football in the afternoon. Here we have the subject, for example, here is Ahmed, which is singular. Ahmed is singular here. So the negative here, we have to use the auxiliary. We have to use does. Does not after the subject, because the subject here is singular. So we can say Ahmed doesn't play football in the afternoon. Ahmed doesn't play. So we have, when we said Ahmed plays football in the afternoon. Plays here, this is we have a verb with s, because usually in the present simple tense, if the subject is singular, the verb follows that subject should be with s. For example, Ahmed plays, Fatima cooks, she reads. So all these verbs are with this because the subject here is singular. So when we make like these sentences negative, I mean the subject is singular, we can say, for example, Ahmed doesn't play. We saw is here, is in the verb should be omitted because we have the we have does here, which is should be followed by the infinitive. So if we use does, we say, for example, Ahmed does not. Ahmed does not. So we should use infinitive in this case. Ahmed does not play. We cannot say Ahmed does not plays. No, plays here is wrong. So we have to use Ahmed does not play. For example, my mother cooks lunch every day. My mother doesn't cook. My mother doesn't cook. So don't say my mother doesn't cook. So we have to use my mother doesn't cook lunch every day because the subject here is singular. So in the case of singular subjects, so we have in the present simple tense, we have to make them negative by using doesn't after the subject and before the verb, and the is which is in the verb should be omitted from that verb. So like these sentences that for example, now look, we have these sentences. Taha doesn't enjoy shopping. Taha doesn't enjoy shopping. So the sentence, Taha enjoys. The sentence in the affirmative, it should be Taha enjoys shopping. But when we make it negative, it will be Taha doesn't enjoy. So the is should be omitted from the verb enjoys. So it will be Taha doesn't enjoy shopping, and doesn't always followed by the infinitive of a verb. Like, for example, now roads are not paved well. Roads are not paved well. So now in this one, roads are not paved. We have the verb to be are. In this case, only we use not after the verb to be if we want to make a sentence negative. But the second sentence here, drivers don't drive fast in my city. Drivers don't drive fast in my city. So drivers here is a subject which is plural, not singular. Here in this case, we have plural. So we have to use don't, not doesn't. So if the subject is plural, for example, like drivers, we have to use drivers don't drive. Don't say drivers doesn't. For example, now we say the students don't go to the college by bus. For example, the students don't go. Like the student, if it is singular, we have to say the student doesn't go. The student doesn't go. But the students don't go to the college by bus, for example. So this is the negative of the main verbs. So now we have, the conclusion of this point. We'll say that making sentences negative in the present simple tense can be by using, for example, only the word not in cases of, for example, verbs to be, and that can, for example, sometimes model is. We have to use only not after model is. We have to use not only after verbs to be. But if you have another verb, main verb, like play, like visit, like watch, so in this case, we have to look at the subject. If the subject is singular, we have to use doesn't after the subject, and we have to omit is from the verb. And if we have the subject is plural, we have to use don't after the subject. This one concerning the negative point of the present simple tense. Concerning the questions, how do we make questions in the present simple tense? Questions, we have maybe two types of questions. We have yes, no questions, and also we have information questions, which are called WH questions. WH questions and information questions. The information question, the question that gives the answer, not yes or no. it gives information. For example, when I ask someone, what's your name? Okay, where do you live? Okay, what time do you leave home in the morning? For example, like these questions, all of them are called information questions. But yes, no questions, those questions that give the answer yes or no. For example, okay, are you a doctor? Are you a teacher? Is he, for example, okay, carpenter? Can you, for example, can you drive a car? Okay, so all these sentences are okay. These questions, okay, they are, I mean, yes, no questions. So we have two types of questions: yes, no questions, and WH questions that are called information questions. So if we are asked to make some questions sometimes, okay, for example, we have a sentence like Ahmed plays football in the afternoon. Ahmed plays football in the afternoon. Now we want to make an information question asking about the time here, which is in the afternoon. When I say Ahmed plays football in the afternoon, how can we make a question about in the afternoon? So we have to use here, we have to use when, because we are going to answer by using in the afternoon. Okay, so when does Ahmed play football? When does Ahmed play football? So why do we use here when? Because the answer is information, and also in the afternoon. And also, why do we use does here? Because we have the subject here is singular, because we have only Ahmed. So we have to say when does. So this one does, okay, and do are used in the questions after okay, the question word, which is, for example, when, where, and what. So we have to use does and do after these question words, and then we have to mention the subject after verbs to do. So we can say what does Ahmed do? Okay, what does Ahmed do? For example, when does he play football, and so on. But if the subject is plural, we have to use do. For example, like these, we have two questions. Does Amina do her assignments in the afternoon? Do the students come to the college by bus? Do the students. Why do we use do? Because we have here the students, the subject here is plural, so we have to say do. And in the first one, we have to say does, because we have Amina is singular. So like now, does and do, these are two yes, no questions. They are not information questions. But if you want to make WH question, we have only to add the question word before verb to do. So we say, for example, what does Amina do in the afternoon? What does Amina do in the afternoon? We have to use was, what, and for example, how do the students come to the college? For example, how do the students come to the college? So we use how. So how and when they give the answer. Okay, I mean, they give information, their answer, but do and does, they give yes, no question, yes, no, I mean answer. And also we have, if you have is and are, also the same. For example, are you a doctor? Is she a teacher? So the answer here should be yes, no. Now look, we have some exercises in this concerning the point of the present simple tense. This is, dear students, I want you to okay, focus on these sentences and look at these sentences and try to use the verbs which are available above here. Use them in their correct forms. For example, complete the sentences using the following verbs. You have some verbs: cause, close, connect, go, and live, speak, take. So you have some sentences, and this is for you. You have to use the correct verb. For example, I'll give you only one example, which, for example, Tanya. Tanya, you have to look at the subject first. The subject here is Tanya is singular, so the verb follows Tanya should be with is. Okay, so when I say, for example, Tanya speaks, Tanya, we have to say speaks. Tanya speaks German very well, because the subject here is okay. So in the second one, we have plural subject. We have Ben and Jack. This is plural, not singular. So we have to use a verb without is. So for example, I say Ben and Jack go, not goes. They go to the same school. Ben and Jack go to the same school. So you have to look at the other sentences and make them correct using the correct form of the verbs in brackets. Also, there's another activity. Complete the sentences using the verbs here. Sometimes you need, for example, the negative. You have believe, eat, flow, go, grow, make, rise, tell. So all these verbs should be used in the in the sentences. Sometimes you need to use negative sentences according to the context of the sentence. Okay, it will show you if the sentence should be negative or affirmative. So I have to read these and do it carefully. I think now we have came to the end of this lecture. of the present simple tense. I wish you all the best, and I wish to meet you inshallah in the third lecture concerning other tenses.